My name is Vittorio Cotroni. I'm the innovation lead for the supply chain planning practice. A bit about myself. I have been working on the SAP ERP, the APO planning tool, and since I joined Westernacher in 2014, I have been working on SAP IBP. The S&OP process is one of the processes that we cover as part of the planning practice, and in particular for the ones that are not familiar with it, the S&OP process is the long-term planning process that allows businesses to identify earlier in time requirements and ensure that capacities are available and that resources are allocated to cover those requirements. Most of the times you are mainly focusing on the production capacity, but as we have seen at some of our customers, transportation capacities become more and more important, and this is something that is not always covered within the S&OP process. Or if it is done, it's done through a lot of manual effort. So that is basically what we want to review and check with you during this session. We will go through first with identifying a bit the current situation and what are the challenges that current businesses have with their current solutions. We will then see a solution we have implemented in our Westernacher system landscape, and then we will go through a bit the benefits that the solution can bring and identify also additional things that could be done within the same solution. So, how it is freight capacity planning done in most of our customers? What we have seen more and more is that this activity is performed manually through the use of Excel files, so it's often not considered during the S&OP process, and when it is considered, it's actually performed through the download of Excel file from one or more systems in the IT system landscape. These Excel files are then consolidated into a unique Excel file where the future demands are calculated, and then this file again is uploaded, for example, in the tool that is used for transportation planning or for the tendering towards our carriers. This, of course, brings a lot of manual effort for the business users, and this is basically the problem that we want to tackle. Additionally, what we have seen is that the fact of using these Excel files also restrict companies to perform what-if scenarios within the planning. In particular, there is a survey from McKinsey where we have seen or that highlights how on a regular basis we have situations that affect the supply chain networks, like could be the SARS, our COVID, other possible impacts and situations that generates troubles within the network, and very few companies actually are able to perform what-if scenarios, with nearly 10% that has no scenario planning and another 30% that is working only with best case and worst case scenario. So what is the effect of this current situation? What we have is basically that we have a lot of manual efforts for the business users because data are manually loaded and downloaded from the systems. We have the challenge of identify earlier enough requirements of freight capacity. So this brings also to the difficulty in ensuring early in time better cost or better rates with our carriers, and also a lack of visibility of the overall supply chain network. How did we try to solve the current challenge? So what we did in our Westernacher system landscape was basically to use an existing TM system, our IBP system, and having the integration of the historical data into SAP IBP, and then bring this information back to SAP TM. Of course, if you are a manufacturer or if you are a retailer, you could have the information about the future demand, or you could use the information about your past sales to generate what are your future requirements in terms of demand, and therefore of what you will be planning to transfer between locations or to replenish within your locations. This is, of course, not the case of a logistics service provider, where instead you do not have this information, and instead the best guess that you can generate is actually using the historical freight bookings that are available in TM and to generate the future demands. So this is basically the scenario that we built in our system. So in this case, we will use the master data and the historical data coming from SAP TM. We will generate a statistical forecast in SAP IBP, and then we will be sending back the future requirements in terms of freight capacity towards TM, where the tendering process will take place. So what we will see in the system, we will see a first step where we will go through the work list in SAP TM that will be the base for our history. We will then use that history once it has been loaded. We will see it in a planner workspace where the data will be analyzed. We will be generating the statistical forecast in SAP IBP, and then that information will be sent back to SAP TM. So here we are in the freight booking work list, and here we are instead on the IBP side, where we are basically through this planner workspace verifying if our job of integration, loading the historical data from SAP TM has been successfully executed. We have seen that the job has finished, so we can basically having a look at the data into our planner workspace. What we see is that we have different key figures that we could analyze or that we have created in the system, and this is completely customizable. We have a container count history representing our requirements in terms of containers requirements. We have a container count history outlier that is basically cleaning our history from potential outliers. Then we have a statistical forecast key figure that will be the result of our statistical forecasting, and we have added one additional key figure for manual adjustments that could then be reflected in our container count total demand. That is actually what we will be writing back to SAP TM. In the same way, we have created some additional key figures to bring also the information about the weight, so we could potentially also have a gross weight history, having an outlier correction of our weight history, having a statistical forecast, a manual adjustments, and a total demand as well. Good, so now is time within this planner workspace. We have also different dashboards or analytics that we can view. For example, we have one where we can look at the data from a weight perspective, and another one from a container count perspective. As we see, or we could notice that, for example, some demand could be missing. In particular, we could see that the demand is actually quite different between the two container types, so we could analyze into the details through a drill down and see that, for example, we haven't generated the statistical forecast yet for one of our carriers. So what we will do then is basically execute the job directly from the planner workspace, and we will verify that the statistical forecast has been generated. So we have executed now the job in SAP IBP. We could verify the status in the system, and while we are waiting for the job to be executed, we will just be going to show you the forecasting model that has been executed in the system. In particular, we have executed a best fit using a smoothing algorithm. Best fit means that the system will try to optimize the algorithm, finding the best parameters of alpha, beta, and gamma for a triple exponential smoothing algorithm, using as a quality parameter the mean square error that we have specified as quality parameter for the forecast. Okay, we can refresh then the job, see that has been executed, and now if we look at the data, we see that the forecast has been generated also for the additional carrier, so we can now review the forecast and send back the information to SAP TM. Okay, good. So we have now executed the job to send back data from IBP to SAP TM. What the system will do, or what we have created from an integration point of view in this job, is that the information with the freight capacity requirements are then sent back to TM, where this information will be staying first in a staging table, and then will be pulled in from SAP TM whenever they are required. Good, then we are now in SAP TM. What we are seeing is the freight agreement master. This is basically the document in TM where you basically manage all the RFQ process, from identifying the requirements till the management of the RFQ using your tendering process till the sign off of the contract towards our carriers. What we see here is that we have a validity date, we specify the currency, and we have the carriers with whom we want to share basically our freight capacity requirements. What you see is also a calculation sheet and a corresponding rate table. The calculation sheet basically indicates the different charges that we could have within the agreement, and for each agreement for which rate we will have a different rate table specifying at which level those rates have been defined, and this is something that we could have pre-agreed with our carriers. Now what we will see is that initially in this freight agreement master, we do not have right now any capacities. We have defined in our example periodicity that is defined yearly. This represents the level at which we agreed with our carriers to define our requirements in terms of capacity. We have seen that we have done it yearly for this example, but of course we could change it to quarterly, monthly, or even daily if required. And as we can see right now in the in the rates, we do not have any data because we do not have the information, or we haven't loaded yet the information in the system about our charges or our requirements in terms of capacities. What we are also seeing is that these rates vary depending on our charges, so we could have some charges that depend based on source, destination, and equipment type, while others could be depending just on source and destination. Now, what we will do is basically load in the system our capacity. As you are seeing, we are just doing that just through the click of a button, where we are basically pulling this information from the staging table that we were mentioning before. And once we have done that, we can also review and analyze how our rate tables look like after our load. So we are going now to see the rate table of the first charge, where we see that is depending also on the equipment type, and we have the requested capacity on the right side. Then we will move to the second rate table, where we basically can check also the rates depending, or the requirements in terms of capacity, just based on source and destination. So this information will then be used for our tendering process. We can then send or communicate these requirements towards our carriers and manage directly the tendering process within TM. Okay, good. So what we have seen data integrated from TM to IBP in order to load historical data. We have seen IBP generating in the planner workspace the statistical forecast. Eventually in that planner workspace, planners could have been adjusted the figures, could have made some what-if scenarios using standard IBP functionalities. And once we are happy and ready with our future plan, we could be sending back this information through the execution of a job that will then populate the staging table that is used from sub-TM in order to pick up those requirements. So what are the benefits? Benefits are, of course, related to the automation in all this process, because we do not have business users using Excel files in loading data or consolidating data. We have, of course, a faster identification of our requirements, and in this case we could leverage this, ensuring better rates with our carriers, and we could achieve also an improved forecast accuracy, because we will have users less focused in manual activities like performing efforts in extracting the data or loading the data, and they will be more able to focus on generating better forecasts in the system. Of course, what we have seen is something that well fits to a logistics service provider. If we are a manufacturer or a retailer, we were saying that in this case our starting point could actually be our future sales plan that we are generating in SAP IBP, for example, as the result of our demand planning process and the supply planning process to generate requirements. In this case, we would be also having the information about potential changes in the market that we are foreseeing, changes potentially in our supply chain network that we are aware of. And the only thing that could be different respect to what we have seen so far is actually bringing that information that we have identified, or those requirements that we have identified, from point to point, disaggregate them down on the single legs from a transportation perspective. An additional thing that we could also add in the solution is also to bring information about rates and freight cost in the past. This has two additional advantages that we could bring when performing our S&OP process. On one side, we will be able also to forecast our future freight cost, and we could perform also profitability analysis in terms of how much profit we could gain if situation changes from a supply chain network point of view. With this one, I just want to thank you, and yes, if there are any questions or just let me know.